Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Crusty Canuck. This is a new format I am working on called Fastball with Crusty Canuck. And my first guest tonight is a very, very special and dear friend of mine now. He's also one of Canada's new outspoken favorite sons. He's a vlogger, a podcaster, actor, director, an all around great guy. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Adam Daniel MEZEI. Welcome, Adam.
Oh, it's great to be on your show, Crusty. You know, it's so nice to finally be a guest on somebody's show. I've been wanting to be a guest for so long. It's nice to be the guy that's asking the questions, but sometimes it's just nice to be asked questions. I guess it's the equivalent of spooning.
Sure. If you're into that sort of thing, that's okay.
Wait a second, you're not?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes. I have spooned before in the past, and I have memoirs to back them up, but that's a different story. But without further ado, yeah, so please tell my audience there, Adam, a bit of your background, what got you into acting, writing, your location, what inspires you, what are you looking forward to in the business, outside of the business, etc.
I've been in movies for almost 22 years now, and I started out as a screenwriter. So I'm a professionally trained screenwriter. And then I transitioned into production. And in between that 22-year period, I lived in Eastern Europe for half a dozen years, in Prague, in the Czech Republic, where I was still doing film work. I was doing production service. I had my own radio station. So it's been pretty much media and entertainment like for the last 2 decades. When I was living in the Czech Republic, a dear friend of mine, we used to go out and, I don't know if you've ever been over there before, but it's a very leisurely type of place. And it usually involves a lot of alcohol, preferably beer, mixed with other types of things. We used to go out a lot, and I used to be sort of this type of guy at the table that I would always kind of entertain people with sort of like just like you in a way, like accents, and I would put on these different persona, and I had all these memorable lines and skits and things that I used to enjoy doing. So a dear friend of mine said to me, she says, you really ought to think about doing this formally, because it's all fine and dandy for you to entertain people here at the table, but you probably want to get this on camera because it's pretty good stuff. So that's kind of like the germ, the seed of how the acting stuff started, because I never really went into it thinking that I would do some acting. I mean, like I did a little bit of photography when I was in my 20s, and like a little bit of I don't want to call it modeling because it makes me sound a little bit not the way that I want to be known as, but like a little bit of that type of stuff. But then I really came in when I moved back to Canada about a decade ago. I really went hard on the performance stuff, and that's when the vlogging came out, and that's when sort of the auditioning came out, and that's when a lot of the film roles and the commercials and the stuff that I do pretty regularly these days. So the acting came last, the production and sort of the structure came first. I really would love to get. I'm just remembering all the questions that you asked me. I'd really love to get a recurring role on a series. That's kind of like, I think, what all of us aim for, but I'd love to play a character day in, day out on a series for a prolonged period of time. And the reason I want to do that is not just because I suppose it's a lucrative thing to do, which is always a nice thing to think about, but I think it's because the amount of work that we invest in trying to become a certain type of a character, and the way that I like to holistically embody the type of characters that I play, it's a lot of effort, it's a lot of energy. It's a pity not to be able to do that over an extended period of time. If you do a lot of preparation, it's kind of a pity that you don't have a chance to do that, again, like I said, over a period of weeks, many shooting days. In my particular instance, I usually get cast a lot as antagonists, as bad guys. That's kind of generally how the industry looks at me. I'm generally sort of the foil. I'm the bad boy. I'm the villain. I'm the corporate marauder. I'm usually one of those types of guys. And I don't know if I've mentioned this at all on Hidden Gem, which is our live stream on Sundays. But it's not how you want to. It's not what you want to do in the industry. It's how the industry looks at you and how it evaluates you. and you just can't fight that energy. It's like trying to swim upstream on a river. If the industry is casting you constantly as a bad guy and you want to play the dramatic lead, it's just not going to work. It's just not going to fit well together. Yeah, so that's kind of where I want to go. I just want to get better at what I do. Do I want to? I mean, obviously, it's more high profile stuff that I can do. I don't know if I want to sell out and do sausage. Like I see my friends on TV doing HSBC ads, the bank, right? Hong Kong Securities Bank Corporation. They do HSBC ads. I don't get charged interest on my checking account. Like, I'm not sure I want to do that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And he probably has a nice regular royalty check coming through, probably at least $2-3 every couple of weeks type scenario. But I don't know if I'm ready for that just yet. I do like the fact that as I'm not in the union as a performer, so I can pick and choose my spots. And I can boogie when I want to boogie, and if I don't want to take something, I don't have to take something. So if you're a union player, you don't have that much flexibility. And I'm generally not a union person given my politics. So that kind of explains the industry stuff. And I've been a little bit reticent to do any sort of union type activity just because it really rubs me the wrong way. And I think in Canada in particular, and not to pull it off onto this topic, but with Canada in particular, this whole sort of the virtue signaling in terms of how it intersects with culture, I'm not sure I want to be a part of that at the leading edge of all of that garbage. I do enjoy. I mean, I know Toronto really well because I'm born and raised here. I really like my standard of living here, but I suspect at some stage the city will become not as comfortable as I remember it being, at least for the last, let's say, dozen years that I've been back since I moved back from the Czech Republic in 2010, and in the fall of 2010. There's other places I might want to be, especially in Canada. We have a lot of beautiful places where I'll want to be, but I'm thinking a lot about the West and things like that. But that's kind of maybe for a future discussion. I'm still clocking, still hungry. I'm still very ambitious. I still, I wouldn't say I've slowed down. I still take care of myself. I still work really hard at my craft. I love doing characters. So that's kind of where my passions are.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I concur. I remember looking at Toronto as a young lad, thinking it being the mecca of the Canadian entertainment world. My favorite band of all time, Rush, comes from Toronto. So you would think, well, if Rush comes from there, it must be a great city. And I did some training in there with writing and acting myself back in the early 90s in that city. So you'd learn the craft and timing and the fourth wall, what have you. And you were surrounded by decent people that were into the same thing. And I understand, especially when you're saying about the whole virtue signaling too. Every time we see something about a protest in Toronto, especially through mainstream media, you're seeing the whole, well, like you say sarcastically in your show, center of the known universe, that arrogance where Toronto is superior and the rest of the country is nothing. And it's like, I've been around all over this country and I've met wonderful people. I would say on a cultural scale, Toronto is far superior than what Edmonton is, but I would sooner live just outside of Edmonton than downtown Toronto, just based on my experience. But yeah, you nail it in the head there too when it comes to the whole shift, especially the past 12 years, I would say too. I've been out here in Alberta for the better part of 12 years. And every time I go home to see family members or friends, what have you, well, even when I buried my mother, it was a real dynamic, just a difference. When you get off the plane at Pearson and get into a car or rent a car and you leave the GTA to go north, you're just like, wow, just a weird vibe. You know what I mean? Just, that seems kind of odd. So, but I understand where you're saying you're being typecast too. Do you find that you're not really given a fair shot when it comes to auditions, or when you're given work, or when you're given the opportunity to work? Do you find that you're not given the ample opportunity to really get into the psyche of your character?
I really enjoy playing the bad guys. I didn't think I would, actually. And I didn't think it was something that I would thrive in, but what you have to understand about playing antagonists is that, as they teach us, no good person is entirely good all the time. They have foibles, and no antagonist has dastardly designs at all times. There could be elements of positivity, elements of goodness, if I can describe it like that, within their character. The other thing that you have to understand about antagonists is they don't necessarily think that what they're doing is bad. I mean, if you're psychopathic, obviously your empathy is out the window. But if you do have some empathy, they think that whatever they're doing is right and just and justified, moreover. So it's always fun as an actor to try to plumb those depths and try to figure out exactly where the pressure points are. And then if you do a lot of good prep, if you do a great deal of preparation, you end up discovering some really interesting things, possibly about your own character as well. I mean, I'm not going to be, to answer your question, I'm not really going to be the type of guy who gets those heroic roles. Don't get me wrong. I've done some small movies where I'm the main character, but I don't suspect, and I don't have, I'm not even regretful of it. I don't suspect that I would get like a big high profile television series job playing like, I don't know, like the romantic lead. But I definitely would play like a really strong supporting character. And if I could be so bold as to say, I'm probably going to be the guy that you remember when you finish watching the movie, because I'll do something, you know, as being that character that will make people remember me. But I think the questions that you asked is more along the lines of the auditioning process, and is that like is that an effort in frustration to some degree? I don't know. I you know, being such an aficionado of baseball, I look at it as kind of an at bat, and I go, you know, I'm going to get my 5 at bats every night type scenario, and you know, maybe I'll hit, you know, I'll be 3 for 5 on the night, maybe I'll be 2 for 5, maybe 1 for 5, but I'm gonna get my 5 at bats. So you know, I look at it. This is a bit sort of a big answer, but when I go into an audition, which we don't do that much anymore, by the way, for those that don't know, like we're doing a lot of self-tape submissions, so electronic casting, which is a whole nother discussion. So I have the opportunity within the confines of my studio space in here, and I have a nice little studio separate room in my place that I use just for media activities. But basically the way that I look at an audition is, if you're sitting on the opposite end of that camera, if you're on the couch, so to speak, like watching me do my thing, I'm going to be the best guy, whoever I'm coming in to play for that audition. I'm going to be the best guy for like that 5-10 minute thing that I'm doing for you. And
Nice. Right.
And I'm going to be the best. In other words, this is going to be the best version of this guy that you have seen all day long, even if I never get to play this guy again. But for those 10 or 15 or however number of minutes that I'm doing the scene, you're going to remember this guy, and then I'm going to walk out, and then I'm going to forget about it. And if I get that call, great. If I don't get that call, that's also great. And again, like I said, big answer, but just to put a final point on it, just because you don't get that phone call, it doesn't mean that you didn't do a good job. It could mean a lot of things. I mean, one of the things that it could possibly mean, and I know this because I've casted before too as a producer, is you just don't look right with the person that they've already cast in whichever role you're supposed to play opposite. That's one cause. Another thing is, I don't know, somebody had a bad mood, and you kind of rub them the wrong way, and you just don't look right, and they just didn't want to pick you for that reason. And some of it can be even as pedestrian and as mundane as they just had so many submissions that they kind of did an eeny, meeny, miny, mo type scenario where, you know, and it's just like, there's no justice there, you know? So
I just, funny, we got to pick somebody, let's get this shit, you know, shit again.
That's it. Like there's a stack of, I mean, in the old days, you know, they have a stack of resumes, or you know, now with the modern stuff, you have a bevy of PDFs and a bunch of different sort of JPEGs on your hard drive. And you're so, I mean, I suppose I have a unique look, but there's other guys that have dark hair and that have dark features. So you can get kind of subsumed in that whole sort of, in that population of guys that kind of look like me. So, I mean, I guess the equalizer, or what makes you stand out is, you know, your delivery. You know, something that I do a lot of is I play foreign characters. I do accents. I even speak foreign languages. I like to do foreign languages. We did a big film in September in Sarnia called The Ace and the Scout, which is a World War I reenactment of the very famous Canadian battle at the Oryx Trench. And I got to play. I was the villain. I played Klaus, and it's probably one of my absolute favorite roles that I've ever played. And the film's coming out probably sometime in the spring or the summer of 2021, and that was entirely in High German. So, and I had a dialect coach that I worked with, and I tried not to be myself at all for the duration of the shoot, which was just a great opportunity. So stuff like that.
Well, I look forward to seeing that. We got a question here from a Colt W, and he asks. Question for you, gents. Do you see the virtue signaling cancel culture bleeding into people that you know?
Yeah, I do. I do. I see it all the time. Colt, I see it. I see it daily, in fact. I have a situation in my life where I have people that I like and respect very much that are people that I follow socially. They're people that I even have social engagements with or that I might do activities with. There's somebody that I know that I respect very much who I've acted with in many movies and in many commercials, and his and my politics are diametrically opposed. We don't have political discussions, and I've never actually broached any political subjects with the guy, but I know that he is absolutely not even like he's 190 degrees inverted from the way that I think about the world. And from what I can see, and you know, Colt, you asked about the virtue signaling. I mean, from the signaling that he does on his Instagram and his various social platforms, I'm like, where are you getting information from? Like, what the hell? Like, that's like he's like the quintessential example of somebody who's like absolutely besotted and drunk off of the Kool-Aid, off of the poisonous Kool-Aid, you know, like, so it's not my job to point out why. I mean, if I'm on set, it's happened really rarely. I think it only happened 2 times in my memory where I was on set and I was with kindred spirits. One time I remember I was playing a soldier. I was playing a captain, an Air Force captain. And it was a great project. And the entire table of actors were all, we'll call them conservative or on the right, or people with more conservative minded values, which was just like, even the costume designer was. And I was like, holy crap, that's so rare. But most of the time it's, especially when Trump was the president, it's the usual garbage, you know, orange man bad, Trump's this, that, jokes, especially if you have actors that of color, like if you have black actors on the set, it's always the same yakety yak, you know? So it kind of goes in one ear out the other. I just kind of, I don't really pay attention to it. I wouldn't say that I'm suppressing who I am. I don't get into the discussion. And I don't think anything is monolithic. In other words, somebody that is professing, back to my friend, that the example that I gave. I mean, just because he's professing certain opinions that are radical left or what have you, it doesn't necessarily mean he thinks about everything like that. And then I suppose somebody who's more conservative minded doesn't necessarily espouse, you know, across the board conservative values. It could happen. So I try not to make politics a component of my professional life, just because they usually don't mix very well together. And also, unfortunately, with the way that the industry is structured, it hasn't affected me, I don't think, but I think it could affect somebody's career negatively with some, I don't know, some casting director that has an axe to grind, or some director. Actually, I actually remember one case where the director of one music video that I've been on with a great Canadian country star who actually lives in Memphis now. But I know her politics are similar to our politics, but the director is complete progressive wingnut, like out there. And I'm on my Facebook wall, we have debates all the time about stuff. And I'm never discussing politics on my socials, but I learned this trick, as I said last week on the live. I learned this trick from the Polish filmmakers during the height of what was called martial law in Poland in the 80s. In fact, after 1981, under General Jaruzelski, they'd have waves, because there was extreme censorship in film. But the way that filmmakers like Krzysztof Kieślowski, who made the Decalogue and the Three Colors trilogy, which is one of my classic favorite trilogies of all time, they would insert messaging into their narratives and dialogues that the cognoscenti who were in the dissident camp in Solidarność, in the Solidarity camp, they knew that there was something that they were trying to say, and they knew they couldn't say it outright, but the symbolism or the symbology, and then the scenario was a kind of a signaling to the cognoscenti that this is what they mean to say, and it would skirt through the censorship that was pretty draconian in Poland in the 80s. So back to me. So when it comes to my socials, I have ways of poking at the things that I'm disgruntled with, but I don't actually say it. I do this in my vlogs all the time. I actually say things, and people that know what I'm talking about know, and the people that don't are just, it's going to fly over their head. And that's how I've managed to, I guess, keep on whatever the expression is, keep on sailing, So that's how I've managed to keep it afloat. Because you know what, I just don't want to get into political screeds on BS channels like Facebook, or I don't know what you pick it on Instagram. It's just not the platform for it. I have a perfectly happy and content life, being on live streams with good people like yourself and our other colleagues, and other things that I do, that I don't need to get my jollies, taking the mickey out of somebody on Facebook or some other platform that is only going to make them feel like a dirtbag, and probably ultimately going to make me, when I'm done with them, they're going to feel like a dirtbag, and then ultimately, I'm not going to win. It's going to be like a lose-lose as opposed to a win-win.
Oh, of course. No, I hear you. Colt, yes, I have dealt with virtue signalers inside the military, outside the military, and surrounded by the military. And it's only just going to eat themselves. It's going to bite them on the ass later on. Just to sum it all up. I have my morals, my scruples. I stand by them, and I'll die for them. Period. So another question here for you from Mosh Pit. Niall, drama throughout. Can you elaborate, Mosh Pit, on that?
Drama throughout?
Yeah.
Drama throughout?
He's probably asking how much drama you have faced while on set, filming, etc. Like, is there an abundance of drama that you have to deal with when it comes to political chats? Or
the way that I look at it is, it's quite a bit of an anomaly that you'd have somebody that does artistic things that has a good, well-rounded political familiarity. Like the old saw goes, people speak about politics and religion in inverse proportion to their actual knowledge about those two topics. And I think when it comes to the art community, I suppose culture is at the leading edge of of political change, whatever. That's always been pretty consistent, straight on through from from Weimar, from the interwar period in Germany, straight through to our present day. But I think if people generally wanted to become politicians, they'd go into politics, or they'd join the Liberal Party. That's another way you would do it, right? Because if you can play tiddlywinks, and if you can fry potatoes, well, you got a job in the Liberal Party. But I digress. So generally, if that's what Mosh Pit's asking, I don't have any major dramas at all. It's just like, I get on set. For me, it's like a whole, let me describe it. Like my depending on where we shoot. Now here in the Greater Toronto area, we will shoot a lot in Hamilton, in Stony Creek. We'll shoot a lot, believe it or not, in Oshawa. We'll shoot a lot in the north part of the city, in Aurora, Newmarket, places like that. Sometimes in the city, but a lot of stuff. Pardon?
Great scenery in those areas. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and Hamilton has a lot of these classic locations that in Toronto would cost an arm and a leg, or that don't exist anymore. Being the blue collar sort of factory town, the forge of Canada, as it were. And so it has a lot of these derelict, abandoned forges, foundries, factories, heavy equipment, beautiful stuff like that they've converted into a lot of different. It has old schools that have been decommissioned. It has old churches that have been deconsecrated. There's like a lot of really interesting architecture in Hamilton that and I shoot a ton over there. I just love it. So when I drive from my house, it takes me about 45 minutes, an hour to get into Hamilton. And I get on set and I'm locked in. Like I got, I'll know my lines or whatever we're doing over there, and I'm locked in, and it's a whole vibe. It's hard. It's almost orgasmic, if I can describe it like that. It's just like I'm locked in, do my work. The director's happy. I'm happy. My colleagues are happy. They know what they're getting. They cast me and they hired me, which means they know what they're getting, which means that that's what they're going to get, and maybe a couple of surprises too from me in my preparations. And that's the work. So drama, like I'm not going to go and do a whole political soapbox thing when I'm on set. But that's okay because I have my other life, so to speak. I have my vlogging and my podcasting, which keeps me quite content. Plus my private researches and my readings. So I try to separate the wheat from the chaff. Very rarely do they intersect.
Right on. Good answer. Another question here from Joe CC 5052. What's your opinion of Dr. Jordan Peterson regarding where he stands on the modern world?
I think Dr. Peterson is a good proponent for. He's a good proponent for the type of message that he puts out because he's a handsome guy and he's well spoken and he's fast and he's sharp, and he's kind of indomitable. Like he's the type of guy. Like I think of Stefan Molyneux in this way. I think of Ezra Levant in this way. You do not want to mess with these people or come at them not well armed. And there's a lot of people on the left as well that have this skill too. I'm just naming people that I know on sort of like on our side of the political spectrum, so to speak. So I think Dr. Peterson is a good proponent of the types of messaging that he puts across because he carries a big stick. And he's
very well,
and he doesn't curse. That's the other thing. Like you've never heard him curse. Like I like Ben Shapiro too, but Ben Shapiro talks at Mach 5, and I know Ben Shapiro is a very intelligent man, and I know he has a lot to say, but I don't like watching him because I don't like having to decode whatever he's saying because he speaks so quickly. And I'm surprised that he's managed to get so successful and speaking as accelerated as he does, that he hasn't had somebody at some stage in his career slow him down a little bit, take some breaths, enunciate. I know that's his shtick, but Dr. Peterson doesn't do that. His mind moves very quickly. There's a perfect example of what I was alluding to earlier on, which I said, not all good people have goodness within them at all times. We know Dr. Peterson's struggle with uppers. We know his struggle with he has a bit of a checkered past with respect to his involvements with the United Nations. We know that he has a penchant for, or I'll call it a fetish, if I can say it like that. He has a fetish for communist era art, and he's a big communist era kitsch collectible guy, right? Like, I mean, I like communist kitsch collectible stuff too. I lived in the post-communist world for half a dozen years. But the questions could have come like, why? Like, is it like trophies to like a fallen dictatorship? Is it trophies to a fallen regime, or is it something else? I don't know. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying, and then there's all kinds of questions, right? His wife is like a bodybuilder and he's not. Like, what is that really saying? Like, there's I've heard so many different theories, right? His wife's a bodybuilder. Is he really excuse my language for a moment, is he really a cuck? Is he really kind of like, is he really effeminate? And she's like the man. Like, it's the whole thing's all like, there's all kinds of things. But I guess the point with Dr. Peterson is, who I respect very much. Let me just state that for the record. I like Dr. Peterson very much. I think he's one of our spokespeople, and I think it's high time for Dr. Peterson to shift into a completely a different orbit. In other words, he needs to start taking leadership perspective. He's gotten that big. He's gotten that big, and he's gotten that influential that him going on circuits and giving talks and shitty chats, Tony Robbins style or whomever, he needs to take it to another level because he's just going to he's going to just basically spin and waste a lot of his bullets. And I think that, it would behoove him to do that. And I'm sure he's thought about it, but he probably, maybe I'm speculating, he's probably in a bit of a compromised physical state and he's just kind of getting his sea legs back. So maybe he's taking it slow, but who knows? But I like Dr. Peterson a lot. Whoever's that username is, Joe. Joe CC. Yeah. I like Dr. Peterson, and I think whatever the modern world needs, Dr. Peterson is definitely part of the solution rather than part of the problem.
Well, I agree. Whatever demons that he's had to slay over the past 5 years, I think he's done a very good job. And I think he's set an excellent example of modern thought. He encourages critical thinking. He encourages people to go out there and question the status quo. And I've been a fan of his since I first I heard of him since 2015, especially we stood in the campus of U of T talking about freedom of speech, and then all these little kids around him trying to censor his speech. So in a way that kind of spoke for itself. Stefan Molyneux, another great individual too. I kind of wish he got, his just desserts because he's done a wonderful job. So both those gentlemen, I give them a proper salute, regardless of what demons. Like we all have our little demons we have to slay. I still slay mine on a daily basis. So we need men like Dr. Peterson. And I agree with you there, Adam, too, that he does need to step up on the leadership point. I would love to see him in politics, honestly. I think he'd be a kick-ass politician, but I appreciate his intellect more than I appreciate his leadership. So that's that. Mosh Pit asks again, is he Canadian? Yes, he is. As far as I know, he was born in Alberta, and he had very humble beginnings, basically, where he grew up in Alberta. I can't remember the exact same town, but this time of year, it's pretty hard. Like it's nasty cold. Work, a lot of work, but he had very humble beginnings there too. The finer points of living off the land, hunting, as far as I know. So he's not unfamiliar with rural life by any means. He's a very humble, has very humble beginnings, very blue collar oriented, good grassroots. Let's see, another question.
I mean, just maybe one more point about Dr. Peterson. I mean, forget, he's in the public eye. He's a celebrity. I mean, he is, right?
Oh, yeah, big time now. Yeah.
He's a best-selling author, and he's like he's a renowned speaker, and he earns very well. Commands like a pretty hefty speaking fee, excuse me. And so he's sartorial, and like I said, he's a handsome guy, and so he's going to play the part, and that means that he'll watch his P's and Q's, and when the debates, the so-called the preeminent debates that Dr. Peterson engages in with all manner, all and sundry, they're going to be carefully stage managed and choreographed, and also they're going to be celebrated. They're going to be hyped up to the max, before he does them. They're going to be pumped up, and they're going to be, sort of just promoted like crazy and shilled like nuts. He knows that he has to play up to that expectation, and so maybe there's some degree of how he comports himself today in which he knows that he has to play up to the part of Dr. Peterson. And so maybe that was part of the difficulty. And I'm not a psychologist or anything, but maybe that's part of the difficulty with him ODing, or maybe too hard on the pills and needing to convalesce and go to a facility, and whatever the situation there is. That was all part of it, because maybe he couldn't live up to the strain and stress. I mean, after all, he is like a nice rural Albertan guy, and he's pretty, he comes from mild-mannered roots and humble beginnings, so maybe that's part of it.
Oh, I agree. Yeah,
he's from Jillian here says he's from Jillian Davis. Hi, Jillian. He's from Fairview.
Oh,
Northern
okay.
Alberta. Yeah.
Oh, another question here from Jilly Davis too. Let's see here. Do you ever consider starting your own media entertainment company offering better quality of work? I think we've talked about that.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't. Well, the answer is yes. I would consider it, and it has been considered, or it had been touched upon, or tentatively or not, like over the last, I would say maybe last 4 years, I've done some work like that. The thing you have to understand about production is it's kind of like all encompassing, and it's like, I'm gonna say all or nothing, but there's a lot of escape velocity that you need to get projects off the ground. And yes, there's the notion or the idea of like viral spread and stuff like that. And I've had my interests in a lot of different areas, so I just didn't really want to put all of my eggs in that single basket, because I I did enjoy doing the blogging and the podcasting that I do, and of course I enjoy being an actor, and that takes time as well. And then going back into full-time production would be a little bit sort of taxing myself or burning the candle at both ends. Having said that, I think a lot of the skills that I might needed, let's say, like I said, 4 years ago, I didn't have as well as I have today. So were I to go back into that mode again, I probably do a lot better in 2021 than I did back in 2017. If I could say it, I have to thank the pandemic. I have to thank the Wuhan flu for that, because it allowed, or thank the lockdowns, thank Cheesecake Premier Ford for that, because Cherry Cheesecake Ford Premier Cherry Cheesecake Ford. That's how I should say it.
Say that 3 times really fast.
Because I'm able to like work on some of the things that I needed to outsource to other people, and now I can do a lot of that stuff myself. But I would do it if Jillian Davis were to join me in that endeavor. That would be something I would consider. So there's that, Jillian.
Yes, and I'd like to join too, just for the sakes of poops and giggles. Yes, I'd give it a shot just as well. Yes.
That goes without saying that I think the entire panel that is part of the Hidden Gem podcast on Sunday nights is in that mix.
I think we could do a pretty good job if, let's say, if time and money were not an issue. I think if 3 or 4 or 5 of our heads got together and formulated something, I think we could come up with something just to start. And if an iceberg ever came our way, figuratively speaking, I think we'd be able to handle it just fine. So what say you, ADM?
Yeah, I would say that's it. That's in the pipeline already. I think that's already an ongoing discussion that we're having right now. And we've been talking about that over the last few days, but yes to what you said, and yes to Jillian, and yes to everybody else.
Oh yeah. I'd be on that like white on rice, or a fat kid and a Smartie. Big time. That would, I think that would open up a lot of our creative impulses too. Like I said, I've done stand-up and I've done improv, and I have always had an affection for improv comedy, everything from Second City, Wayne Schuster, to Kids in the Hall, to all the Canadian greats, everything. And laughter, I think, is essential, especially this time, with all the hype and the letdowns and the insecurities and misinformation. It's good just to turn your head and watch 35 minutes of pure comedy. It relieves the soul. And I would love to give it a shot too. But I also I like my venture and my channel. I like what I do with my podcast. It helps me focus, get things out there, let people think again, without worrying about the mainstream media telling you what to think. Oh, got a special treat here. Veteran's Voice, Chris Sumchuk, donated $20.99. Wow. Thank you very much, Chris. Appreciate that. Thank you. Cheers. Yes. Thank you very much. That's much appreciated. Yes. I would love to have a sit and have a beer with all of you. I probably have a glass of wine. Don't drink much beer anymore, but I'll have a glass of nice vino, smoke a hoolie, put on some 2112, and then we can just carry on as per. So, what else? Any more questions, ladies and gentlemen? Please don't be shy. Adam is an open book. I'm an open book. Please ask us what you'd like to know. Follow the roll screen at the bottom. You can reach Adam at MEZEI.ca. Ask him anything you want there. Follow his work there as well. Like I say, independent thinker, actor, writer, director extraordinaire, vlogger, and great podcast host, by the way. So, here's another question from, there we go. Thank you, Mosh Pit. Appreciate that. Cheers. Is there any roles you have played that just expose the oppression as we face as Canadians? Interesting.
Yes, I would say that when I get involved, this is how I'm going to answer this question. I would say that's when I get involved with commercials. And the thing with commercials is they're selling product or service. And what I have noticed in the last 2 decades that I've been doing this is the transition away from most of the talent on a commercial being representative of, let's say, what we'll call old stock Canadians, which are just basically, people from, for lack of a better descriptor, the British Isles, France, and the Europeans that came here in the 60s and the 70s, etc., to what we call new Canadians, or people from other parts of the world with darker skin colors or different looks in their faces, what have you. And so what I notice, a lot of the national commercials are being cast exclusively with requests in the spec. In other words, if you look at the spec, where we find our work, but in the spec, the preference is for, and they'll put it in so many different ways, but it's either we're looking for POC talent, people of color talent, or the famous, LGBTQA 1, 2, 3, all that stuff. They'll put that in there. So they're actually specifying that in the spec. So I've turned down jobs where the storyline just doesn't make any sense to me. Like the role seems good, but the grandeur umbrella of what they're trying to tell in the story doesn't appeal to me.
Mhm.
I did a film. I can tell you this story though, Colt. I did a film 2 years ago. I don't want to dox the person, but I'll just say generally what happened, where the character that I was playing was a fixer. So you'd come to me for fake passports, stacks of cash, wipe your identity, hacking, things of that. I really liked the character. But the over, and I had the crap beaten out of me on the day, which was just so much fun. I mean, I had trauma makeup, and it was probably one of my best scenes that I've ever done. But I was like strapped to a chair, and the FBI guy was just wailing on me. It was just amazing. And then I just remember the scene. I had the woman that was playing my girlfriend in the eye line just beyond the camera, and like I think I started crying because she was just, I just told her stand there and just sympathize with my plight. It was just an amazing scene. And the overwhelming storyline was just complete bollocks. I mean, it was just, it was absolute poppycock. Like I had nothing to do with that story. I came in as a day player on a favor, I think. And needless to say, there were some issues with the production. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do this, and I know I'm going to regret this. They ended up cutting my role and replacing me with another type of guy, which I don't know, that happens sometimes. But that was an example of a story like, oh crap, what happens if I get known for this? Or if I'm in commercials where like I'm in the minority. That happens a lot too, where like you have to do things. I've never gone on a knee, thank goodness. I'll never do that. Like it's not a commercial where I have to like like the CEO of Chick-fil-A, like polishing people, like shining black people's shoes and stuff like that, African Americans' shoes or boots or whatever. I'm not that bad, but I notice it a lot every day. And I mean, if it's docudrama or reenactments, for example, I just finished a project last week, which was, I love doing these, the reenactments of true crime scenes, so murders or things of that nature, where you get you're relatively similar looking to the people that they're trying to depict. But so those are pretty faithful to the real people. Like you're not gonna, if the guy was white and the perpetrator was white, you're not gonna make him to a black person, right? It's just it doesn't work. But for commercials, like for shoes or for products or for telecom or for banks or for insurance or stuff like that that we get offered to us, they're generally looking for people, again, that are in the societal ascendant. And right now, unfortunately or fortunately, that's generally so-called people of color and things. That the whole terminology just vexes me to no end, but let's just say that that's basically what it is. So they're picking and choosing on that basis. So Cole, that's when I get that sense of again, I'm doing the scare quotes, the oppression as Canadians. That's really where it starts to bother me on situations like that. But you can't really do anything about it because I suppose if the people in the commercials are all white people, people, I don't know. This never was a problem before, but it somehow became a problem today. People in Mississauga and Brampton, and in the donut, as we call it, in the 905 area code, around the core of Toronto, are not going to go and buy telecom because the main character, the mom in the thing was white. Like, I don't get it, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, whatever dynamic they come up with, same thing. When I left the service, I had opportunities to go to post-secondary education, and a lot of institutions, applications that I signed to try to get forward, there's about a page and a half dedicated to one's identity. And I'm thinking that's irrelevant because I would like to get training in something. What does my gender, what is my sexual orientation, and the color of my skin have to do with me getting post-secondary education when it's going to be paid for by Veterans Affairs? And I did receive personally a couple of return letters. Thank you, but we're not interested because, and it's like, okay, sure. So yeah, it stings everybody. And I can honestly say, even both of us, Adam, that you and I were raised in households where we don't judge people on that. We judge people on their character and how they treat others. And we don't need to be diversely woke. We don't need to be told what to expect. We judge people on merit. Now, in your business, I can see that being a little difficult because from you being a producer too, picking what you think is going to suit for a certain part, it would matter if that actor had a year's training or 20 years training. If they give you what you want, there you go, right? But if I'm going to hire someone to work in a factory for me to make widgets, I want someone who has a design background, someone who understands drafting, someone who understands weight and measures. I don't care what color they are or what gender or how they identify. Do they have the qualifications to back that up? That's my concern. So yeah, I can see Colt on both sides of that too, whether it be in the acting world or in the regular civilian world, whatever, people doing their thing. There's too much of the POC stuff, not enough. Let's just get people on the go and hope for the best. Help people get successful by their own means.
I mean, like, I mean, I'm ethnic for all intents and purposes, so I don't have any problems with ethnic people. And being in Toronto, it's an ethnic city, so it's just my city. I never thought of it any other way. I mean, I went to high school with all kinds of different ethnicities. I know you grew up in the GTHA as well, so like that's how we did it, and it was never a problem. My dad owned a retail shop for many years, for 40 years. And so the customers that would come in were all in sundry. My dad had clientele from, so-called all colors on the rainbow. I mean, there were all kinds of people that would come to my dad's store. And I remember sitting there as a young boy on Spadina Avenue, where my father had a store, and people would come in all the time. I mean, we didn't have that issue at all. My dad was so good at, I don't mean speaking in the past tense. He just doesn't do it anymore. He kind of just plays these days. He's like semi-retired. But he go into accents all the time. It was just hilarious. That's where I got. I guess where I got it from. My dad would go into these accents, like it was just fun watching him. It was his. You know what it was? It was like his stage. For like he'd leave the house in the morning. And then you go into the store, and he transformed for like 8 hours, 10 hours, whatever, how long he was there. And then he came home, and then that's it. Like it was like the work done for the day. But anyway, the point is there were all kinds of people that would come in there. We had Chinese people coming in, we had Black people coming in, we had Europeans coming in, we had so-called old stock Canadians coming in. We had people from everywhere coming into that store, small little store. So we didn't have that issue. We didn't like, oh, you don't talk to that person. My father was always extremely gracious to this day, and very, even in a semi-retired state. He I think my dad does a ton of business with Chinese people even to this day. So like we don't have any of that in our. It's not in my DNA to be that way, even though I do speak about the issue in a very forceful and opinionated way with respect to politics, because again, I think that word is not, I don't think that word is incorrect. It has been weaponized now as a thing. And I again, scare quotes, as a thing. Being a person of color or so-called ethnic is a thing, right?
Yeah.
So now it's not fun anymore. Now it's not a flavoring, a peppering, whatever. Diversity, that word, if it was used, I think circa 1985, it would have been kind of cool. And if you would have said that word in the 80s, it was kind of cool. Like it was another way of saying the Canadian, what do we used to say in high school? The tossed salad. I think that's how. That's I know
mixed
that,
salad.
Yeah,
tossed salad's a prison term, my friend.
So I was
like a salad. Yeah, tossed salad's a different concept. Oh,
yeah.
I'll save it for another show.
Yeah. But versus the U.S. melting pot, and that was the big thing that we would learn in high school. I remember like that. If you go in social studies class, that's the thing that they're pumping all the time, and they're talking about that. So like that was a mark of distinction. Now it's just a screed. It's like it's like putting Chewbacca in prison and playing a high pitched tone and driving him mad. Like if you remember that scene from Empire Strikes Back, on Cloud City when they put Chewbacca in with all the pieces of 3PO. Remember that? And then Han gets tucked in there. Right? Remember that?
Yep.
Sorry, it wasn't there. It was what I'm talking about. It was in Tatooine. It was in Tatooine when Han came out of carbonite sleep, and then the guards would throw him into the pit with Chewie, and Chewie grabbed him and said, "I can't see, good buddy." Remember that? Anyway, sorry.
Okay, yeah.
All the Star
Return of the Jedi.
Return of the Jedi, yeah. I miss you, good buddy. I can't see. Yeah.
Well, Chris asks again, what comparisons do you see the film industry on the production side and the military? Well, WRT, leadership and hierarchy, or hierarchy.
With respect to leadership and hierarchy.
Yeah.
Do you want me to answer that, Major, or do you want to? Would you like Crusty to take that?
I'll see what he says here. Let's see here. Oh, he's not answering. Well, we can take a stab at it. I haven't been in the film industry enough to understand the hierarchy. And you show up on set, talk to your producer, what does he want, your director, etc. I've done some extra work, so I'd listen to the producer and the director. And I guess depending on the scale of the set itself, it depends on who's calling the shots. So you can take orders from producer and director. Fine, I'm not there to question them. I'm just there to get the work done. You want me to move here, move there, do this gesture? Fine, I'll do it, whatever. And then we go from there. Adam, you want to take that part?
I like hierarchy, actually. I gravitate towards it. And I really enjoy, it's going to sound so funny. Okay, I'm not going to say it so it sounds funny. I really enjoy acting up to standard so that my director is satisfied with the work that I'm doing. And I have sort of bedrock principles that I apply to my professional life. For example, with respect to punctuality, with respect to preparation, with respect to collaboration in terms of, and by this I mean to say is, what are you offering your fellow actor in a scene? Are you making the job easier? Is it all about you? Are you looking for the best angle so that you're always kind of like you're the center of attention? Or are you in the film for the interests of the story? And if you're in the interest of the story, do what you can to make the story better, even if that means that you're not getting sort of like the great angle sometimes. And are you one of those pain in the ass actors that's on the clock, or are you there until the job's done? There's all kinds of different components. So I'm a team player in that regard, and I like hierarchies. And I think a film production needs to be run like a military hierarchy, and there can't be too many cooks spoiling the broth, and you can't have somebody that doesn't understand the chain of command. If a film set is actually run like a military hierarchy, and there is a chain of command, and and from the minute that you step on set and the day begins until the minute that you wrap, it's all like everything's being done through protocols. So like if it's a big production, you're actually being accompanied from wherever you park your car into the actual what we call the holding area. From holding area, and they process you and they take you to the set. Or process you includes makeup, costume. Then you get onto the set. You're taken by the first assistant director to your chair, placed there. You're getting ready for your scene. The gaffer and the lighting person, in other words, comes by with the director of photography, with the DP, and they're checking best angles, and they're checking luminosity. Like, I'm just giving you like a general overview of what happens. Like in the minute, and you're the actor, you're sitting there, you're in character, you're all made up and you're all costumed up, and you're going through your lines, and you're trying to relax, and you're trying to just basically take it as it comes. So so then once that's done, you're taken back to where you started from, and then you end your day. There's a whole series of individuals, more people as the production becomes more complex, that have their specific micro job to do on the set. And of course, for independent productions, there's a lot of overlap and a lot of bleed in between all these different, what we call them, department heads. Art, camera, director, production. They call them department heads. But I really enjoy that process. And despite the fact that I'm probably, in a lot of these cases, I'm considerably older than a lot of the people that I'm working with or that I report to. Moreover, I always give them consummate respect. They're the boss on the day. I call them boss. I call them sir or ma'am, whatever the case may be. I'm always very respectful, and I act that way. I don't make it colloquial, or I don't call the director bro or buddy or or bub or whatever, dude. Or I'm always I happen to be that type of individual. But I suppose that's where it becomes for me very militaristic or very martial or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I can see it.
I would say that's an upbringing trait too. Mind your P's and Q's, that good stuff. I was taught that as a child too. respect your elders and all that. And when I signed the dotted line for King and Country, I almost kind of fell into it. I had to follow the same procedures as everybody else, but it was one of those things that stuck with me. And like I said earlier, but my experience on set, yeah, I would listen to the director and producer what they wanted, right? And then I'd sit with the other extras. We chew the fat about what's coming up, what we knew about the scene and all that. Okay, and we briefly discussed where we're going to walk and all that. But yeah, it was matter of respecting the chain. So I think a lot of that has to do with your characteristics as well. Like when I dabbled in punk rock, there in my late teens, early 20s, you meet a lot of bands, a lot of promoters, and you come across some bands that were actually making a decent living out of it, but we met some real divas too. So when you go talk to a promoter to get a show and get your exposure out there, you don't treat the promoter and the owner of the establishment like a second class citizen. They're giving you a place to play your music. They're giving you a place to basically sleep if you needed it, or something to eat, or something to drink while you do your music. And you got to show respect to that. And that's a matter of character. That has nothing to really think to do with the hierarchy. That's how your parents treat you, how they raised you, and how you treat other people. So, but yeah, that's a great question, Chris, too. Comparisons too. But Adam, of course, he's the film guy. So when I want to make my autobiography, I'll get Adam to film it and direct it for me. Yeah.
Next question. Am I going to get a chance to play you as well?
If you want, maybe my budding youth days, possibly. We'll see. Can you shave your head though?
Sure.
Get some, get the old insurance salesman kind of roll over here. Maybe a odd comb over or something, something like that.
Chicks dig hair like that, by the
way. Just don't tell my wife that. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Another question from Jilly is, if you no longer be in the entertainment industry, what would you do?
I have to think about that one for a little bit. It's not that I don't know. It's just I have to think how I would respond to that, because there's an artistic side to what I do, but there's also a very businessy side. And I'm not one of those actors who is oblivious to the business imperatives. And like, I like negotiating, for example. Like I like, like I have a little cryptocurrency sideline that I do. I enjoy that a lot. I have a pretty extensive coin collection. I like buying coins. Like that's kind of something that I do. You don't typically associate those. I mean, I'm tidy, you know what I mean? Like I'm not a flibbertigibbet, whatever that expression means. Like I'm not all over the show. Like I'm very Cartesian and mathematical. Like an interesting point, I always tell people this, they can't really believe it. When I graduated high school, I got 3 scholarships. So I got one to go to U of T in science.
Lucky.
I got a second scholarship to go to Western in actuarial science, because I'm good with math. I've always been very good with math. I was excellent with math in high school, and I really thought, I wouldn't say I would be a mathematician, but I knew I was going to do something math oriented, and it never materialized. And then I got, I think, a 1-year scholarship to York University, and then I ended up going to McGill, and there was a reason for that, and a lot of it has nothing to do with what I studied there and everything to do with what was going on in Toronto. But the point I wanted to make to Jillian was, so there's a businessy side to me that I would probably want to, like, I love being in control of like all aspects of my life. Like, for example, I don't know, like buy a big house and like furnish it with everything that I could possibly want, and like, build, like I want a lot of acreage, like I want to have like a lot of space around my house, and build like a nice studio in there and just do all kinds of the type of stuff that I do now. I mean, I think the question is probably alluding to, would I go into politics, and would I be a political animal? And I don't know. I mean, I would say that, I have an extroverted type of personality, but I think I gravitate towards introversion, and, I know how to turn it on and off, but I kind of an extroverted introvert. So I really enjoy my solitude. And I don't know if I'd want to do something that is constantly in the public eye. And like, especially here in Canada, with respect to how our question periods are conducted, and the sort of the MPs, members of Parliament, are circumscribed by the things that they can say and cannot say. I don't know if I'd function well in that arena, because there are times when I just want to express myself the way that I want to express myself, which may encompass a great deal of cursing, which may not, which may encompass some clearly politically incorrect statements, or it may not. I don't know how it's going to happen for me on a given day, and I just want to go at it as I feel it. And so if you're in a formalized type of industry segment or sector, or if you're in a formalized job and if you have responsibilities, then you can't do all that stuff. So I would like to say that I would probably do well in Parliament, especially when it came to like genuine attacks on the government side and like getting answers and stuff like that. And the theatricality of it, I suspect I would do very well with that. But to what end? Like, is it actually, is it moving the needle forward? Can my efforts be better used, elsewhere? So maybe that's not the answer you were looking for, Jillian, but that's kind of where I'm headed.
I could see you doing business. Yeah, I could see you as a mover and shaker on Bay Street. Put Mr. Wonderful to shame. I could see that. Yeah. Well, the more I think about it, yeah.
I think what I like the most is I love my freedom, and I love the latitude that I have as a freelance person to do the things that I do, and I love my liberty, and I love my ability to come and go. And by that I mean to say is I'm not beholden to any structure or boss. I mean, we all have a boss. What I'm just trying to say is like I'm not beholden to anybody's schedule, and I have no problem with schedules. But I'm not beholden to anybody else's expectations. I can work there are days that I'm so enthused about something that I'm researching or that I'm doing, like I'll spend hours on it, or not. If I feel like, I don't know, going to see a friend or something like that and having a beer, like I can do that too. So I'm not exactly sure I'd want something rigidly formalized, and I think I'm at my best when I'm unshackled, in a sense of like I'm just when I don't have any, like there's no governor, like I can just kind of float a little bit, and that's when some of the best stuff that I've done in my life happens. Obviously that's not the situation that you're going to go through in your life all the time. Obviously you're going to have schedule, you're going to have expectations and milestones, but I think in the main, I love that. I call it theme plus variations. Go back to music. I love theme. There's like a theme, and then there's variations, and I love variations. That's kind of where I do a lot of my best work.
Excellent. All said. Well, we got something from Mark Dietz here. Okay, Adam, I've got it. Adam should play the little bro rain man who blurts out absolutely based autistic responses. That would be funny. That would be hilarious. I could just see you in the Dustin Hoffman kind of role. And then some kind of effeminate SJW brother holding his latte going, Peter, you can't say that. Stop that. That would be funny. That's just mine.
I'm watching this series right now. It's called Yellowstone.
Oh, Kevin Costner?
Yeah, it's a great series, and I'll tell you why I think it's great. Well, first of all, I love the wide open expanses. I've always loved horses. My parents sent me to summer camp when I was in my teens, and the camp that I'd go to, I used to always go to the stables, and I love to work with the horses. So I groom them, I'd feed them, I'd jump them, I jump with them. In other words, I'd take them on the courses. I'd ride them. I love horses, and I just love the idea of the mountains, and then the plains, and the silence, and the guns. I'm not gonna lie, everything. That's kind of what I gravitate, and it's a bit strange coming from an urban kid.
Guns are fun, kids. So,
but I really legal guns. By the way, I just want to say for that.
Yes,
I just want to put that proviso in. And so I just love the wide open spaces, and we have those spaces in Canada. Mm-hmm. And
even north of TO, Orangeville has a great area for that.
Yeah,
beautiful area in that area. Yep. That's right.
And so this what I love about the series so much is the characters are real, the characters are believable, the storyline is very, very legit. They do a wee, and I mean in the weest of wee signaling. For example, some of the wranglers on the Yellowstone Rancher Lab, there's 2 or 3 guys there, and they do, and they for one episode they had an Indian girl, like a First Nations girl, that was one of the wranglers, but a wee bit. It's just like I would call it a peppering or a soupçon. It wasn't like full on hammer smash like in Canada. It's like you've got to actually pepper it in there and then actually put a bright Klieg light on it and say, and then pause the fucking the footage for 5 minutes and go, and then move on. Like, in other words, to get to ingrain the idea that that it's a thing. So that's what I love about it. Yeah. And I'm so shocked that it actually made the grade on Prime, because it's all those, it's got all those themes in there that are sort of, you would think anathema or antithetical to, or that would make the lefties apoplectic. It's like, it's real virility, guys getting into bar fights, it's like men defending women's honor. It's like rivalries between, and not to give it all away, but like rivalries between different power brokers and stakeholders, and and like lust and all kinds of crazy stuff going on there. Oh yeah, the other thing is the governor of Montana in that series is a woman. So think like little tiny things like that, but nothing too major that you can't deal with, right? So whereas I completely got, and this is again for, you'd think for an actor, I'd want to have as many research touch points as possible. I got rid of my Netflix account in the wake of the Cuties debacle. I just got rid of it, and I'm never going back to it. And now I have other ways of getting the series that I like, thanks to my friend Gabriel Scheer, but I digress. But I mean, I will support the platforms that I believe in, and I won't support the ones that I won't. And the only reason, excuse me, that I keep my Amazon Prime account is because there's a lot of things that I'll buy from the Amazon store that I like the convenience of the Prime shipping, which you get the Prime Video with. Otherwise, I wouldn't have seen Yellowstone at all. I would have had to just get it through the other way that I get things.
Understood.
So it's not often that I catch a series these days that I really like, because generally it's got a lot of gobbledygook in it, and none of it is none of it. I'm having trouble talking today. Hold on a sec. Sorry about that. Hope you didn't hear that. And so it's rare that I see a series that I really like, that I gravitate towards, and Yellowstone happens to be one of them.
I think a lot of the shows out there now too. Like I agree. I got Yellowstone on my Prime too. I just haven't watched it yet. But no, I agree. My wife and I constantly change channels over and over again. We'll watch mainstream news and other news channels, local news. A lot of it fuels my fire for my show too. So it's, in a way, it's good. I love my sci-fi, so I'll watch my science fiction kick. I don't watch Discovery as much as I used to, because it's just doesn't hold that Star Trek brand like it used to. But I'll be very selective. My wife kept her Netflix account, so we'll watch some movies and shows off that. I'm a stickler for a lot of British police dramas and stuff. I love Midsummer Murders because of the tongue in cheek. I thank my mother for that. That's just brilliant. I like watching that show. But I agree with you, there's the television. Oh, another question from Jilly is, Christine, Adam, what would you like to see happen in the coming days politically and culturally for Canada? Well, let's see. That's a good question. There's a lot of things I'd like to see personally, but you go ahead, Adam. You're the guest.
I think politically, and this may be a completely unwarranted expectation or request, but I think politically, just to take some of the pressure that is at unbelievably high levels in our society, especially out west, I would like to see a change in the composition of the government stat. And by that I mean to say is either another party taking over and changing the direction of how politics are practiced in the nation's capital, or a spanking of these people that are basically running Canada into the ground, taking a perfectly good thing and destroying it. As the old adage goes, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. And I think that really applies in the case of Canada with the current prime minister being the third generation of the Trudeau clan or tribe or what have you, and taking a perfectly beautiful thing and running it clearly into the ground. So politically, I'd like to see something happen. I don't know what that means. It could be a cocktail of the Wexiteers in the west, between Saskatchewan and Alberta, driving a very sharp stake into what heretofore has been a very placid or flat line type of political thing. By that I mean to say is that Ottawa knows it could just basically snap its fingers and asphyxiate Alberta, or shut down the oil sands, or basically make Alberta their you-know-whats. I'd like to see something happen on that front, just because I think it's important for Ottawa to get the message, and primarily the Liberal Party, that these people will actually bite you back if you keep on kicking them and spurning them. They will make you suffer for that. I'd also like to see some more. I mean, there's a huge discussion in terms of what needs to happen in terms of the evolution of the system, but I think there needs to be more equitable distribution of constituencies and ridings in Canada, so that it's not so tilted so heavily to the east, where it's this ridiculous thing that we talk about so often on our shows. It's just like the election's over by the time the results kind of make their way west, and it's almost like a stupid pretense at democracy that everybody in the West understands is completely irrelevant to them, but that we keep participating in just because that's what's been going on since Confederation, and there's been no major revolution. So something like that. Like I want there to be kind of like a there has to be an incident. I'm not saying it has to be a violent incident. It needs to be an incident that upsets the apple cart.
Yeah.
Culturally, politically, and culturally is. I remember I was just talking to somebody the other day. They were telling me that they've been living here in Canada since they were 4 years old, on a rotating series of renewals of their permanent residency. And they didn't want to get their Canadian citizenship because they come from a European country, funnily enough. They didn't want to get their Canadian citizenship because they didn't want to be Canadian. And that's, to me, when I heard that the other day, that was very emblematic of something that I abhor about our Canada today, which is that people don't see the pride, the healthy pride in loving everything about this place. I love this place for my own reasons, but also for very straightforward reasons. Straightforward reasons being, it's a place that gave my parents a place to get their start. My parents both come from very difficult upbringings, and this was a place where they were able to thrive and have a family. That essentially all members of my family are here, and it's all that I know. It's I always call it, it's in my C drive. It's the thing that I always sort of snap back to, that I gravitate towards, is where I was educated. I don't know how to describe it. There's things that are part of being here that just make me happy. And I can read books by any prominent Canadian historian, or even Conrad Black, that just make me smile, and I can get lost in the pages for hours on end. I just love learning more and more about the history of this country. And every time I travel out west, especially, and even to British Columbia, but especially out west, I'm always amazed when I'm in these places. And remember when I was in Vancouver for a short sojourn, and you drive up the sea to Skye to Squamish, or you drive up to Blackcomb. It's just like you look out to the west, the left side of the car, and it's just like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe Horseshoe Bay, or Tsawwassen, whatever. Like you're just like, oh my gosh, this is ours. Like this is ours.
Yeah.
Like, this is ours. Like, wow, And Canadians, that, back to that story about the person who didn't want to get their Canadian papers, I'm like, well, there's too much of that going on these days. There's people that are looking to us just as a document, or as a means to an end, and people that are sort of pillorying us or lampooning us, and people that live in this country that are lampooning us, like people from other countries that think that their culture is better, or they think that we're to be taken advantage of or easy marks, or they think that we're farmers, or they think that we're yokels, or that we're passive, or that we're any one of these words apply, or that they think that we're craven. And I wish some of these people can get a taste of some serious patriotic tonic, of what that is. And I don't know exactly how that translates, but it really gets on my nerves when I hear people that do that. I'm like, so you want the cream, but you don't want to contribute. Like, you want to be here, but you don't want to be part of it. And like, what's wrong with it? Like, it's a beautiful thing. I talked about my coin collection. Like, I collect old Canadian coins if I can. And I love the thematic stuff. I mean, I revel in that. I just love it. The blue nose, all of our war battles and in the various sort of like coats of arms, and all the monarchs, from the beginning, from Edward VII to George V to George VI. Well, of course, Edward VIII who abdicated, but then George VI and Queen Elizabeth II. I love the effigies, and just getting into it all the time. When I'm in Ottawa, like, I stand in front of the War Memorial on the other side of from Parliament Hill, and I don't know, it does things to me. I just love the drive into Ottawa, and then if you stand on the Gatineau side and you look at the Parliamentary Library on the reverse of the building, on the north side of the building. And a few months back, I think a couple of summers ago, I was in Ottawa, and just being on the Parliamentary lawn, and then looking at the House and Centre Block, and just even when I'm abroad and I land back in Canada, even going through customs, it gives me such a great feeling, the familiar, the bilingual, and just getting the customs form on the plane coming back from wherever I'm coming back. It just, so people that don't appreciate that, I don't really understand that, and I don't like it. And culturally, I love to see people I love to see people like that not be a part of our society. And by that I mean to say is, if you don't want to be part of it, then you don't have a right to be a part of it. You can visit, you can, you can sojourn, but then you don't get all the stuff. And that's not the way it works these days. Unfortunately, I think the way that it works these days is people get the cream, even if you don't want to make the commitment. And I think that, like I said, at some stage in this little bit, that's what's bringing Canada to her knees, if we're not already brought to our knees. And I think that could change if there's a political tremor. Maybe even more than a tremor, if there's a political quake. I'd love to see a political quake, but I don't know how that would actually commence, or what would be the triggering, or what would be the catalyst of that. But that's kind of my feeling.
Well, my theory would be the coming days, politically and culturally. There's hints of an election, hints of not an election. Can we afford it? Can we not afford it? I think the matter is that some of these parties can't afford it. It's not a matter of the people. It's the parties. A lot of people are dipping into their savings to keep the lights on, to keep the mortgage paid, to keep the rent paid, to keep little Billy at his hockey if he's allowed to play. And what I'm seeing politically, that there's going to be hidden rage coming in. And I've said this in my show numerous times, Jilly, too. I don't want to see violence. I don't. I've done it. It's not pretty. There are people that I've known personally that I buried that have witnessed and incurred said violence. It's not good. And just to emphasize your point, Adam, about people who want the cream, but they don't want to milk the cow, granted. And that's just not necessarily people that hold a dual citizenship or just stay Canadian for the sake of the benefits. I'm seeing that with a lot of people in the younger generation too. They want all the guts and glory, but they don't want to put the work into it. They don't want to make that commitment to put the $5,000 or $10,000 down on a down payment. They want the education. They want this. They want that. Okay, I got my 4-year degree. Oh, where's my job? Well, what's your degree in? Oh, it's in basket weaving, or it's interpretive dance. Well, duh. Now you're $65,000 or $100,000 in the hole because you went and got yourself a useless degree. So it's a matter of choices. So when it comes to culturally for Canada, I don't see a lot of actual the can-do attitude. I see it out here in the West, and rightfully so out in the East. But I don't see, let's pull up our pants and get the effing job done. Politically speaking, I'm seeing that too. I'm seeing more people, such as myself, not to toot my own horn, that want to get into parliament and stand there and do, excuse me, you said you were going to do this. Now what's going on? Regardless of the parliamentary rules or the inadvertent political correctness crap of it all, that can be changed. You can put a person in his or her place without being insulting, without being rude. There's not enough humbling out there. There's not enough humility out there. I've been humiliated numerous times in my life, prior to my terms in the military, during my terms in the military. But it's because of those situations that taught me I can be wrong and I can be right too. It's differentiating the two. So there's going to be an upheave, I would say, not in violent regards, but there will be hints of violence. We're not like our friends in the States, okay? But who's to say that's not going to happen up here too, based on JT doing something stupid or Jagmeet Singh doing something stupid or this politician saying this or saying that. To coin a term, too many cooks, but not enough. The kitchen isn't big enough and there's not enough food, not enough product to put out there, right? So that's my point on that. We'll just leave it at that, right? Because I'm getting so passionate. So from John Lemon, Trudeau said he would reform the federal election. He didn't do that after the experts, and the Liberal pocket convinced him that it was necessary to keep the first past the post. Well, he's a liar. That's proven. And he doesn't want to change anything of the sort. So it's going to take somebody to get elected in the next election, I would say, to return the screw. And okay, Toronto, you're going to have these districts to look after now, not 50 or 40. You're going to have about 6. And Montreal, I'd say the same. And then let the rest of the provinces decide. Too much federal regulation calling these shots. Not enough input from the people. Adam?
Changing first past the post is a massive undertaking. And I agree, it's an absolutely ludicrous way to contest elections in Canada, given the type of populations that we have and the concentrations of them, where they are, etc. That you can actually take the riding just by having one more vote than your competitor. It's just like,
it's scary, isn't it? Yeah.
It's scary because the way that voting is done in a lot of constituencies is Canada is based off of color. In other words, party color, red, blue, whatever, yellow, whatever, green. But also in terms of, it had been said by people eminently more intelligent than me, voting in Canada is an ethnic popularity contest, especially in Ontario and Quebec with the 199 ridings. It's like they wheel out these candidates that look like the people in the ridings, and then they get the votes, based on it's a horrendous way to actually politic. It's a horrendous way to actually conduct an election. I think it's pandering, and I think it sullies the whole process. Now, getting to change that constitutionally is, even in a situation where there's no, health emergency type scenario going on like we have right now, that's a huge undertaking. And what I think if I can say it like this, is what I think should happen is, how Trump put several things through in the States that cannot be undone by an executive order. Like here's a good example. You're not going to move the embassy in Israel back from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv. It ain't happening. Like, it ain't happening. Like, you're going to have like one of the biggest diplomatic incidents, in that part of the world, if that were to happen. But there's some things that are like, what's another thing that happened? You can't all of a sudden, obviously North Korea and Pyongyang and Kim Jong-un can continue to fire missiles or do some salvos or things to provoke the South Koreans or primarily the Americans. But like, after crossing the 54th parallel at Panmunjom, in the DMZ, like, you don't go from that, and shaking his hand, to I don't know what, like putting troops in the Republic of Korea, and then it doesn't go like that. So what I'm trying to say is, there are some things that were done, or like NATO all of a sudden America doesn't go, okay, NATO members, we got you over 2% national spend contribution to the alliance. I'll just go back to one. Like once certain things become fait accompli, it's like it's locked in. Obviously, there's some things that executive orders that can be done clearly that we've seen with the guy that's in the office right now, but there's some things that can't be undone. So back to Canada. So I think there are some things that can be done politically, like you said just now. If somebody else comes into power, it's on the books, it's done. For them to undo it would be like a whole massive constitutional crisis and or like some kind of a massive incident that if it favored groups that previously had been marginalized specifically, if things were done to placate, to involve the West to some degree, and a lot of Wexiteers would say it's too far gone for that, but let's just say for argument's sake, if things were done to make it more equitable to Westerners, to give them more control over their provincial national resources, especially the oil, then there may be, once that's already on the books, to undo it would be like a whole story. But we have to get to that point where somebody has the ability to do that. So I just don't understand. I just don't understand what kind of society we've become. Forget if you're a liberal or a conservative. I don't understand what kind of a society we've become where people are completely so diametrically opposed to the opposite political opinion that they're perfectly fine overlooking clear-cut crimes and clear-cut conflicts of interests, ethical violations, other calumnies, other destruction of bilateral relations. Like, people are completely fine overlooking everything that the current occupant of the PMO has done because their dislike of conservatism or the other party is so strong that they'll take this guy no matter what. Like, that we as a society have become that jaded, that we as a Canadian society have become that deluded. I never thought in my time that we'd actually see that, but that's what we're seeing. And we've been seeing it since 2015, and especially since 2017, we've seen that. And most definitely since the last election in 2019. I mean, it's just, it's enraging that we have become so accepting of grift and graft and corruption. It's, my friends in other parts of the world where you have genuine grift and graft and corruption, like my friends in Brazil, they can't understand what's going on up here. A beautiful country that was on the leaderboard on so many metrics and being rated as one of the best places on the face of the big blue ball to live, that that we've deteriorated to this level. I don't know what's happened to our society. I mean, there's answers, but I'm just saying, like, to think that we've gotten that far, it's very tragic.
Well, it's disenfranchising for some, especially some of my veteran brothers and sisters too, that are still fighting the system to get their benefits. For example, some of the seniors that I have met throughout the years that are having struggles based on the like you say, la vida corona, and then other issues, and then the government not taking its part, and every day seeing the word salad from these leaders, and all leaders, not just the liberal dynamic, but you're seeing conservatives saying they're conservatives, they're not. You're seeing liberals saying they're liberals, but they're furthest thing from anything liberal that I could ever think of. NDP, I just don't give them any creed whatsoever, because to me, they're just glorified champagne socialists, if anything. I don't really listen to what they have to say. Sometimes when it's bantering, when I watch the CPAC channel, I see it. But we're not seeing, like, I don't want to toot my own horn again, but we're not seeing the grassroots political leaders get up and actually plead with these people. What the F are you doing? Look what this decision that you have made to spend these billions have done. Look what the decisions you have made not to give clean water. Look what it's done. Okay. And not only the clean water debacle, but this is stuff that's going on 25, 30 years ago that were in every conservative and liberal prime minister's hands. Nothing was done about it. So we need more blue collar rooted people to get in there and basically discipline little Billy for swearing in class, right? Let's not punish the whole class. Billy, you knew better. Smarten up. You know what I mean? That brass tacks, that brass monkey, to really get in there, hold these guys account and do something more than just, an ethics, $300 fine for you making an ethics breach. No, let's take half of your pay and then we'll give it to a charity of our choice. So therefore you understand basic humility, right? Because really it's the taxpayers' money. It's not the Canadian government's money. Anything that says Canadian government belongs to the people when you think in this democracy. That's one of my platforms for the VCP. It's like, okay, you screw up, you pay the price. It's about being an adult, not so much being the leader or being a male or being a female. It's about being an adult, owning your stuff, owning your shit. So, and even now with the liberties being in question, and I've had people weigh in on my show too, saying, well, Crusty, we can't have people worrying about this and worrying about that. And it's like, well, why are you sending police officers 5 or 6 at a time to one guy's house for being in a parade 3 days ago? Or why are you sending 4 or 5 officers to a hockey rink to detain a 20-something man for telling you where to go? Last time I checked, you can tell a police officer where to go as long as you're not throwing stuff at him. You can sit there to a cop and do this, and they can't do crap. But if you just touch them like that, then okay, they get you for assault to the letter of the law. So be it. But we're losing that primary instinct of this is what I'm allowed to do, and you cannot tell me what to do anymore. Really. I've been in firefights. They suck. Do they want them? Okay. Don't say we didn't warn you. And I'm not saying that as a gun owner. I'm not saying that as a Canadian. I'm saying that as a sane, able-bodied citizen that is willing to give his or her life for this country. That's simple. So another question before I get all heated here. And we'll take a couple more questions there, ladies and gentlemen. Feel free, please reach Adam at the link at the bottom, MEZEI.ca. You'll be quite entertained with some of his tongue-in-cheek vlogs, some of his video, and really, that's what he's got to say. Please give him a shout. From Mr. Tasenko. The only way I can see Canada fix, or correction, the only way I can see to fix Canada is Alberta to separate, start a republic, and then slowly incorporating the rest of the country under republic banner under free trade agreements. And Tasenko, that's probably a great idea. As much as I would hate to see this country break apart in pieces, especially after what Meech Lake did back in the 90s, okay, I can see the logic why Alberta wants to leave. Really. Alberta's been getting the raw end of the fucking deal since Christ was a cowboy. Adam.
I think with respect to the Wexit stuff, and then I don't want to go too deep onto the Wexit stuff. And there are people that are much more conversant on things that are happening out west than me, especially since I don't live out west. And I don't really think I can observe, I can be a fan, I can be sympathetic to. I can orbit around, but I ultimately cannot say one way or the other. And I think Canadians in the East that have the temerity to start suggesting what the West needs to do, I think it's just it's a fool's errand. And so I generally try to avoid talking about things in the West just because even if I have an opinion that's valid, it's not my place. It's a nice idea, Saniko. I think it's a nice idea. It's very difficult to implement, and deconstructing or unpacking what it would require to get to any kind of level where there's, I use this expression a lot, where there's some kind of escape velocity, to get into a situation where that can be a conversation that can be had. I don't know how that starts exactly. I like the idea after, and I also like the idea that people will be able to come to said republic were it to come about, and they could live there, and everybody lives under the same sort of freedom-loving, freedom-seeking principles. But I don't know how that actually gets to that point, because just from my observation of what's happening with the Wexiteers or the separatist movement in the West, is it's not all reading from the same hymn sheet. So, and regardless of La Vida Corona or not, I think there needs to be some harmonization or some parallelism going on with that movement. And so far, it hasn't demonstrated that up to this point. So I think it's mostly parlor theorizing, which is what we're doing, as opposed to concrete, actual action steps. Having said that, there have been other projects, other nation building or yeah, I'll call them nation building projects in the past, not in the recent past per se, but in the past, that were ones deemed to be completely fantastical, wild-eyed, pie in the sky ideas that actually have come about, that have resulted in nations. So it's not impossible for Alberta to imagine itself a situation where it has, if not pure republic or pure separatist movement, at least powers that are commensurate with what Quebec gets, in terms of being able to call its own shots on so many different levels, whether it's the pension, whether it's the taxes that it collects, whether it's its own immigration policy, whether it's its own sort of resource management approach and stuff like that, that the West should have at least similar, and all provinces, of course, as a result, but primarily Alberta in this situation. That would be interesting to see how it comes about. I don't know how it starts it, constitutionally, legally, or otherwise. I'm not the person to ask, and whether it can actually happen, that's another discussion entirely. But it's nice to think about.
Well, true enough. But the thing is, the overall long-term cost for Wexit too. Say, hypothetically, if Quebec would leave, okay, what would it be? You'd have some issues with transportation if you're driving the East Coast, because you have to stop at their borders, check your papers, etc., then carry on, and then work your way into New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, respectively. But when I look at the Wexit model, I'm not saying I'm a Wexiteer, but I can justify why there's that sentiment of, wanting to leave, really, because a lot of Torontonians, I'm not saying you especially, Adam, but a lot of Torontonians forget where a lot of this gasoline and other products come from. And regardless if they're buying the petrol from Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, Venezuela, or from other dirty, war-torn, dirty oil country, okay, a lot of their daily use products, everything they bake with and cook with and text with, is based on a lot of Canadian petroleum products. And considering that Alberta and parts of Saskatchewan are the hub of the Canadian petrol industry, you would think there'd be a little more respect. But there hasn't been respect for this industry. Now, Harper dwelled on it a bit, but obviously the Trudeau Liberals really don't care about it. They want the money. And some of the Quebecers that I've debated in regards to this, they almost think it's an entitlement.
Right? Yeah, I want to say something about that. There's an idea comes to me, and if you don't mind me just interjecting on this point for a moment. What you'll hear a lot from this part of the country is that people feel that oil sands oil is Canadian, and therefore it belongs to all Canadians. And it irks people in the East when people from Alberta and Saskatchewan, but primarily Albertans, will say it's our oil and we know how to exploit it properly or extract it properly. And we don't want to have to just give it to you just because you ask for it. We want to be able to have some say in terms of how it's extracted, refined, where it's sold, how it's distributed, etc. And people in the East that know a thing or two about anything will say, no, it's Canadian property, and so give it up to Canadians, right? Like we have a right to have a bit of it too. Well, my response in that situation would be, well, okay, so we'll go with that. We'll go with that explanation. It's Canadian property. Let Albertans develop it the way that Albertans know how, which is environmentally to the most pristine environmental standards, the most in the most cost-effective manner, in the most intelligent manner. But then, if you're going to say that the oil belongs to you too, in other words, let Alberta exploit the oil and sell it, and they'll even give you some. There'll be billions of dollars to share, and they'll give you some. They have no problem. Just let them control it, okay? Then I will say in response, then you start devolving some of the power out west. By that, it means we'll let you have some of our oil. If it's Canadian, then why isn't power also Canadian? In other words, why isn't influence also Canadian? Why is influence only an Eastern thing? Why is political power only vested in the East? Why isn't political power part of what's going on in the West? Is the West just something you pump and dump? Is it just something that you extract from, that you siphon out of, that you drain dry? I mean, where's the equality proposition? Where is the parallelism? In other words, there has to be a bit of a give and take here. Now, again, how you affect that is another discussion entirely. But like, if some Nimrod is going to say, Albertans, sit there, shut up, it belongs to Canada, Canada built all. I mean, I'm just saying this is how you'll hear people talk like that out here. Canada built all the infrastructure. You just go and take it out. You didn't pay for any of that stuff. We paid for that stuff. We all paid for that stuff. So you just go and take it out of the sands, and then you share it with the rest of us and stop complaining. Well, I'm like, it's just like, what about if Albertans say we don't like all the power in your 199 ridings that you pack to the gills like sardines with pliant electorate that will always vote you into power, that you strategically place like a sultan or like a tsar, like in specific areas of the region, so that you can always stay in power. And Albertans don't like that. What if they want to have more ridings in their province? What if they want to have more representation? What if the Senate should be elected instead of appointed? Like all kinds of other discussions, right? You'll never hear people say that quid pro quo. Okay, quid pro quo. I've heard Albertans say when I was there, we'll give you some. You want some of the booty? You want some of the lucre? We'll give you some. Just let us run it the way we know how, because we know how to do it best out here. We've been doing it for years. We know how best. Let us do it. We'll give you some. We don't want to hoard it all for ourselves. We're not greedy. We're not gonna cut you out of the action. So I don't know. There needs to be a bit of give and take. It's not going to happen. And I think in the main too, I don't think Canadians are in the East especially are well traveled. I think their idea of traveling is going to the Caribbean or going to the States or going to Europe in the other direction.
Going to Florida.
Yeah, something idiotic like that. And more people need to spend time in their country, all regions, not just the West, also in the Maritimes. And even if you can make it up to the far north, people need to spend time in their country and see it for all that it is, and get into conversations with people, I don't know, at diners and cafes and restaurants and bars, and just get and as a soldier, you would meet a lot of other Canadians, obviously, because there's a crystallization of and it's a funneling effect of all of the different soldiers from the different regions coming in, and you get anyway, you're posted at different bases around the country, etc. So you get a chance to meet the regional, Canadians from different regions, and we are different. Let's just say that out front.
There's no doubt about it.
We are different. We are different. I mean, like, I am a city boy. I'm a Toronto kid. Like, of course I went to school in Montreal as well, but like, I'm a city kid. So I behave that way. I do it unabashedly. It's just who I am. If I'm in Alberta, people will see I'm a little bit different. I have a little bit of a city swagger. I mean, not so much, but like a little bit of a city swagger. It's just, it's just something that I am. But you want to get a chance to know what Canadians are like, go around the country and see what they are. Stop traveling to like foreign locales, all-inclusive cheap vacations to Cuba of all places. Go to Alberta, go see what's going on. Rent a car at Edmonton and Calgary Airport and just drive around and see people and go check stuff out. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. But anyway, not to get off on that high horse, but there's a lot of very questionable opinions with so-called power elites in the East in terms of how they look at people from the West. I don't understand it. I don't know why it persists. And I fully understand the frustration of Albertans and Saskatchewanites when they're absolutely dismissed. Their concerns are not going to have any kind of clout at all. I totally get it. Every time I'm there, I get it. Every time I talk to people, I get it.
Mm. Well, that's the thing. Like I said, the few times I've been in Ontario, like especially when my mother passed away there in 2016, when I visited, the sentiment, it's like how you say how the East tells Alberta, okay, just dig and shut up, right? There was a time where manufacturing hub was key and an asset in Ontario and parts of Quebec too. A lot of that went away because the free trade agreement that was signed in 1987 or 88, I believe. And a lot of the manufacturing hub, just pardon with my expression, went tits up. And it was Alberta oil and natural resources that curbed the economy. So there was not such a giant recession as there was. But now the way I look at it, and you've emphasized that, there's just a blatant disregard for a lot of natural resources country. Yes, they want them. They're the highest, strictest, I think, environmental standards on the planet. And that's just disregarded because all the Jane Fondas and DiCaprios out there saying, oh, that's filthy. I remember flying over Los Angeles when I went on exercise to Fort Irwin in California. And we were coming in and it was just filthy. And it wasn't because of clouds. A lot of it is because of the city filth. And when you look at the oil fields outside of the greater Los Angeles area, it is a lot more disgusting and filthy, and just it looks like something of a Mad Max movie. Honestly, it's just that desolation. And yeah, all these pump jacks are going. Okay, they're pumping the fuel. Okay, great, great. And then you get these Hollywood know-it-alls who are saying, okay, the oil sands are filthy. Well, yeah, they're filthy, but it's also a natural phenomenon too. Canadians just tapped into it. We didn't have to dig as much, not like they did in Los Angeles or parts of Texas or parts of Oklahoma. Okay, it was already there. It was just a matter of being tapped into, because when you think about it, it's probably the world's oldest oil spill, a natural occurrence. If you want to blame something, blame the bloody ice age for that. It opened up the pores.
Well, the way that I've heard it described is Albertans are just cleaning up the biggest natural oil spill.
Really, when you think about it, I think of a Flintstones episode where Fred is walking into this tar pits as a dinosaur, and he's holding his hand up like this, and he just keeps walking and sinking and sinking and sinking. A natural occurrence. It wasn't like all these machines came out in the 1950s and dug this giant, great big pit, and then oil just seeped into it. It was just a natural phenomenon. And what gets me is, until we find a way to actually wean ourselves off of fossil fuels, this is what we have. So when people in the East are talking about, oh my goodness, we can't have this, it's filthy, it's terrible, when they go fill up their car for 92 cents a liter or get some special deal or rebate, they forget that. What suggestions are put on the table to help us understand that? Are they encouraging biodiesel? Are they encouraging ethanol fuel? Can you make fuel from plants? Yes, there's a hemp formula out there where you can grow your hemp and make fuel from that. There's a guy you see on YouTube, I think he's from Pakistan. It's not the cleanest fuel, but he made it from plastic, old bags, old bottles, right? It's a tedious process. It can be dangerous because you're using flame. But if you concentrate and know what you're doing and learn how to filter the gas and create your own additives to make it what it is, you can make your own fuel from the stuff you buy every day. Why are they emphasizing that? They don't want to do that because there's no government control on it, or provincial control, or municipal control, or this group having their say, or that group having their say. So I can see where the Wexiteers can come in and try to make light of that. Right? Let's see here. From Senko again. They have an oil rig in the middle of LA. Most people live near it. I've never seen that, but I'd take your word for it. That's the tar pits, isn't it? I've never been to Los Angeles, so I've flown over it, but I've never been to Los Angeles. Adam, have you been to LA?
Sure, of course. She's talking about the Brea tar pits, but those aren't. They're not digging for oil there. But yeah, there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on in LA. I'm sure there's something there like that.
Well, it used to be the rock and roll mecca. Now it's what, homeless central USA.
Yeah, Skid Row. Yeah. I mean, San Francisco's the big problem. Obviously, that's the capitalism run amok with people just like pooing in all like the different sort of lawns and stuff. Homeless people pooing in all the corporate lawns, just like taking out their, just dropping their trousers and just having to dump like in the middle of the day, and and then trucking syringes and stuff. Yeah, the California's a mess.
Dysentery, gotta love it, eh? Right on.
There's a massive population flight from California. That's why they call it the purpling. They call it the purpling of certain states, like Texas. That's why Sheila Gummery was talking about the purpling of Texas, because there's a lot of people that are Democrats coming into Texas that are generally a Republican red state. That's purpling. That's purpling. It's purpling the state because they're bringing their democratic values or their liberal progressive values to Texas, which are not native to Texas, right?
Well, a lot of Texans wouldn't. Texans I know personally would not tolerate it. They said, "Yeah, come on in, have yourself a good time, put your feet up, but you keep your Democratic nonsense to yourself." And rightfully so. Like Joe Rogan did the big move. I think Shapiro's talking about big move.
Yeah.
Adam Carolla was talking about, they're talking about the big move just because the taxes alone are killing them. Not just the social spectrum, but the taxes are just getting full retard, right? So all in the name of the environment. Like you say, there's people taking dumps in the streets. Well, that's not environmentally friendly. I can understand if there's a community bucket, at least some place to go around some curtain to do your business.
Well, it's fertilizer, right?
Oh, well, if you're growing something carcinogenic, you're better off just having a few goats in your yard and some chicken poop, and there's a little better fertilizer than human waste. But I don't know. It's my basic farming skills is null and void when it comes to using human waste for anything. I'm more adept to using actual cow manure to grow crops and what have you, or waste from my mead product, the old vegetable sediment and fruit sediment. I'll throw it at the bottom of my pit and I'll mix it in with some good topsoil, let it sit for a couple of days, and then I'll just add some natural water, I'll take some tap water, distill it in a bucket, leave it outside for 24 hours, then throw it in, mix it all in, and then I get a decent potato crop. My problem was with the cats peeing in my beds. So I get nice potatoes, but they look like, oh, I had to throw them. I was disappointed, but that's another story. Excuse me. Colt asked again. Actually, no, Senko asked again, or he says again. You can tell where the smell is a few blocks away from Hollywood. Yeah. When you smell human shit, like we smelled a lot of it overseas, and we'd be walking anywhere, any fording anywhere, any riverbeds to cross a certain area to patrol, and you can smell the dust, you can smell the heat, right? The sweat, and you smell a lot of shit. And that's not animal shit. You're smelling human shit because, villagers, whatever, walk from village to village, they'll stop, they'll take a dump and just carry on like it's nothing, right? That's centuries old adage. Okay. But when you smell it all the time, and that's where it gets to you. And then I can see the contrast when I did my security training in Edmonton. You could walk up down the street and smell it too, because some of the homeless guys there are some people. And it's not always the homeless. There are some people who are in a hurry and they go, okay, go around the corner and drop trow and make a wish and carry on with their day. And I'm just like, that's just terrible. Like, really? We're not raised in barns. They had problems with this in the Middle Ages. It was called dysentery, people getting sick and hallucinating because people are literally throwing their shit in the street. You'd think we've come up above that, but now, well, I saw my neighbor do it, so I guess it must be okay. Well, no. If I have to go I'll hold it. I'll stop my truck on the highway, take a squirt. But in my career, in my life, I've never had to stop my truck to take a dump anywhere other than try to find a toilet, especially in the big city. So that's just a question of character too. But I hear it, Tasenko. That's just, so.
I just want to say, I've got a boogie to another talk on the Midway. I left a small message about that when you get a chance, but I just otherwise I'd stay. I'd love to spend more time in the chat, but
not a problem. That's great. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been the first fastball of the Crusty Canuck podcast with my guest Adam Daniel MEZEI, and you can find him at the link below. I'm sure he would love comments and questions and queries. Always been a pleasure, Adam, and I'll definitely see you Sunday for sure. You have a home out here in Alberta, my friend. You're more than welcome here anytime. So whenever you get the urge to venture out west, let me know, and we'll put you up, feed you, give you some proper camping, take the guns out, shoot some livestock, legally, of course. Adam Daniel MEZEI, ladies and gentlemen,
thank you very much
for coming to the show, and we'll see you around.
See you, everybody.